Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. It's 2025, and of course, I know you know that, but in case you missed it, one thing that it means is that Elevate this year turns 75. I'm not sure if the correct description is that it's our 75th anniversary or 75th birthday. We'll go with birthday, given that the church started from zero back in 1950, where a group of people, and this is kind of all we know about them. In 1950, a group of people, some adults, scooped up some kids, maybe it was their own kids, from various families, and they launched a Sunday school in a park with none of the things that we sometimes equate with as being essential to church, no buildings, no budget. And yet, 75 years later, we now are Elevate Church, and we carry on from where they started. And in fact, we would say that they are the pioneers 75 years ago, and now it's our turn. It's our turn to take the baton and pioneer the next season of Elevate Church. So actually, as we go through this year, we're just going to continually focus on what it means. What's the responsibilities that we have to actually step up and step into in order to pioneer the next generation. But look, here's the thing too, by the way, 75 years as a church, I've had the privilege of leading the church for the last 15 years. And what that means, because 15 years is a decent amount of time. This is only the second church I've ever been a part of in my adult life. And it means that I'm not just the leader of the church, but it means that because I've been around for 15 years and planted deeply in Elevate Church for 15 years, that a large part of me is the product of Elevate Church. The product of doing life with the people who are part of Elevate Church, the product of the prayers that we've prayed for one another, the conversations we've had, the encouragement that we've given, the tears that we've cried together. And so here's the thing. I'm saying this 75 years in, 2025, I love my church. And if I was to choose a church, I'd choose Elevate Church. And so we're launching a series today called I Love My Church. And it's very intentional. Like that word love, it's a strong word. And it's a word that we throw around a lot. We're describing a whole host of things. I love coffee. Now, I love coffee. So I would happily say to you, I love coffee. Some of you say, well, I love sports. Guess what? I love sports. Others say, I love movies. Hey, guess what? I love movies. People say, I love cooking. I love cooking. And then the list goes on. And on my list is the fact that I love my church. And here's the reality. We invest in the things we love. So as we position ourselves in this 75th birthday year, we're going to be just looking consistently of what it means to invest in the thing we love. Our church, my church, your church. Now, when the Bible uses the word church, which, in the new part of the Bible, that word's thrown around quite a bit, it actually refers to two expressions of the church. On the one hand, we come across various references to what you might call the big C church, church with a capital C, which describes kind of the universal church, like the global church, the entire kind of collective church. But actually, the word church that's used more frequently is the little c church, the word that when it's used to describe the local church or a local church. These are individual expressions of the church. And here's the deal. I love both. I love the church and I love my church. We're going to talk a lot about both of those things and how they overlap. And then for us as being part of a local church, what does that mean for us? Starting with our mission, the reason we exist and the focus of everything we do. And we say it simply. Our mission as Elevate Church is to reach people and build people. So if you're new here, you're joining us online, or you're new to Elevate and you're joining this online experience, here's a reality. If you're wondering what we're all about, this is it. Reaching people and building people. And we run everything through that lens. If it doesn't land, if it doesn't focus on, if it doesn't further that mission, we don't do it. We run everything through that. And this idea of reach people and build people very much points to the idea that there are people there that need to be reached, and there are people here that need to be continually built. And God's heart is for both. They are very much two sides of the same coin. God's heart is to reach people and build people, but we very much intentionally start with reaching people. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, out there are lonely people. There are people wrestling with addiction and depression, and a much longer list than that. There are people who have been hurt by a church in their past, and they're wondering if there's a safer option to maybe dip their toes back into the waters of church life. There are people that are searching for meaning and purpose, wondering if there's just maybe a bit more to life than just kind of living and dying, existing, going to work, watching TV, going to sleep, getting up, doing it all over again. There's people with broken relationships who need some healing and some restoration in their life, and look, maybe even in some cases in those relationships. And there's people needing hope, and those are the people that God's called us to reach. And that's why our mission is written in the order that it's written. First priority, which was Jesus' first priority, is to reach people. And then, having reached them, they and we need to invest in them to see them being built. But it's a reminder that Jesus didn't just come to this earth and die for church people. And that church, his body, can't just be for church people. So, throughout the next month and change, we're going to just walk through some of the book of Acts. Now, the book of Acts is like the history book of the early church. So if you've got your smartphone camera scanner, scan this flow code. It's going to take you to Acts chapter 1. So the very beginning, I'm going to start at the very beginning of the history book of the early church. This was like the kickoff, the launch. Just like Elevate was launched 75 years ago, this was the church as it was being launched 2,000 years ago. And we're going to use their example, which is like, to this date, kind of the best example that there is and was. We're going to use it to celebrate, some of the things that we've done or we're doing that, we're like, yeah, okay, good. We're certainly following the example of the early church. We're also going to use this journey through some of the history of the early church to recalibrate, because it is so easy for us to drift off track or to kind of throw things into what we think church is that actually aren't part of God's design for his church. So let's start with chapter 1 and let's drop into verses 7 to 9. This is what, and by the way, this is recorded by Luke, like an eyewitness account of the early church. So Luke writes this: the Father alone, this is Jesus speaking, by the way. The Father alone, and Jesus also, he's telling this to his disciples. Okay, that's the audience, his close followers. The Father alone has the authority to set those dates and times. You can go back and read that for yourself, and they're not for you to know. Okay, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. So the Holy Spirit empowers us. Okay, some of you might know that, but empowers us for what? Well, here it is. And you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And after saying this, Jesus was taken up into a cloud while they were watching, and they could no longer see him. So Jesus just double clicks. He's already, when you read in Matthew chapter 28, before he was put to death, he gave what we now call the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations. He reminds them his last words before he ascended into heaven. The mission, the job, what we're called to do, the number one priority is to be my witnesses, to represent him, to tell people about him. And here's the reality. He only spoke those words to a relatively small group of people, and yet we're here today as the church, locally and globally, because the group of people that he gave the mission to actually took it seriously and actually did it. And had they chosen not to, the church would have been a great idea that never quite got off the ground. And they were just an ordinary group of people that Jesus had invested in. He's discipled them. And we've kind of maybe even moved away from that important distinction, thinking that somehow the church and the effectiveness of the church is really on the shoulders of the paid professionals, the church leaders, the pastors, and so on and so forth, which I fall into that category. But here's what I want you to know. My influence and opportunities out there are often like kiboshed in an instant. When somebody asks me, I meet them for the first time out in a setting of some description. So Mark, what is it that you do for a living? And I say, well, I lead a church. And almost every time, things get super weird, super quick. And I see their walls go up. And the most important thing to them from that moment on is whether they, I hear them swearing. And I'm like, come on, man. I went to an all-boys high school. Please. But the reality is you don't have that. And because you don't have that, you're actually more effective witnesses than the paid professionals are. And I suspect some of you can remember being influenced by somebody. You can remember somebody, a friend, a family member, colleague who influenced you and maybe invested in you, which ultimately saw you make the decision to become a follower of Jesus. And I don't want us to skip the important context. Jesus, and I said recorded in Matthew 28, gave the Great Commission, which was like his last words. Well, these are also his last words before he ascended into heaven. And we call this in church world the ascension. In church world, or the church calendar, or the cadence of the church, we celebrate Jesus' birth, Christmas. We remember Jesus' death, Good Friday. We celebrate Jesus' resurrection, Easter Sunday, but actually often the ascension barely gets a mention, and yet a whole lot of big brain Bible scholars tell us that the ascension is kind of equally important to those other things. Like they form something of the whole package for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is the moment where Jesus doesn't just give them, his disciples, a reminder of what the mission is. He actually hands the baton to them and essentially says, I'm leaving you to do this. Having said that, he remains in charge. And when he said, when I go to be with my Father, there's a bunch of things that come with that position, that I'll actually resume my place seated at the right hand of the Father. And I'll do a few things, including that I will rule, great, and also advocate for you. And so what the ascension means is, well, Jesus hands the baton over to us and says, now go, like now the mission is, your life's purpose is, the most important thing for you to give your time and attention and prayers and energy to is being my witnesses. You don't have to do it in your own strength. I am going to be watching over you. I'm going to send my Holy Spirit to empower you. And we'll see this thing, the church, grow in increasing effectiveness all four corners of the world. And as we read through the book of Acts, this idea of the mission being Jesus' witnesses, it's not like a sub-theme. It's not like a marginal theme. It's not like an interesting aside that occasionally gets mentioned. This phrase witnesses gets mentioned 39 times in the book of Acts alone. And it means what we think it means today. It means the exact same thing. It means for us to be able to, a witness to be able to give an account of what we've seen, what we've heard, and what we've experienced. It doesn't require us to answer every Bible knowledge question. I mean, Bible knowledge is good, Bible knowledge is important, but actually, to be a witness for Jesus is to be able to share and to demonstrate with other people, hey, this is what I've seen in my life and the lives of other people who have chosen to follow Jesus. This is what I've heard from the lives of other people who have been transformed because they made a decision to follow Jesus. This has been our experience. This is what I've witnessed. So let me just drop in 2025 a very short list of a few things that we can do to make us more effective witnesses for Jesus in our everyday lives. Here's one, more important than ever in 2025, methinks. Respond with kindness instead of aggression. Hello. You'll stand out for all the right reasons. Help somebody without expecting anything in return. Don't make it a transaction. Make it an investment. Serve your family and your friends and your colleagues. Tell the truth. And then when it comes to like local church stuff, prioritize being here every week. Prioritize giving your time, your talents, and your treasure consistently, because those things in a busy world, in a cost of living increase and so on, when the people around you see you prioritizing giving your time, your talents, and your treasure into the local church, they're going to potentially ask you why. And then you get to say, here's why. Here's why that's the number one priority for me. Here's why that matters. Jesus has changed my life, so I give some of my time and talents and treasure to hopefully impact and invest in and reach the lives of other people. You don't have to overcomplicate it, people. Well, we talked about reach people, and that's the first half of our mission as Elevate Church, and the second half is build people. Jesus commissioned us to make disciples, to introduce people to him, and then to help them follow him, and these things matter. So Luke goes on to write this follow-up of Jesus' ascension, recording that as they, Jesus' disciples, strained to see him rising into heaven, two white-robed men suddenly stood among them. Now, this is like angels. This is how angels are often depicted. Man of Galilee, the angel said, why are you standing here staring at heaven? And you go, well, what do you mean, why am I standing here staring at heaven? I just saw Jesus disappear like an Avenger. Okay, sure. He said, but Jesus, he's been taken up from you into heaven. Like, it's happened. Nothing to see here. But someday he will return from heaven in the same way you saw him go. And in the meantime, while you're standing here, he's given you a job. He's given you a mission. It's not to stand still. It's to go and make disciples, to reach people and to build people, introduce people to Jesus, and then help them follow him. Help him save them, and then be a part of the journey of Jesus transforming them. So we, as Elevate Church, have created environments and practices that we both think matter, we have seen to be effective in people positioning themselves to be used by God to both reach people and build people. We call them our Elevate Essentials. This is 5. Now, they don't include like personal spiritual disciplines, Bible reading, prayer, fasting, those sorts of things. But they're kind of like the things that we collectively invite people and encourage people to prioritize as being part of the local church, the Little C Church, in our case, Elevate Church. Here they are. Number 1, our live experience. Or if you're in Perth and you can't be a part of our live experience, or you're a FIFO worker, I mean, that's a thing. Or maybe, you're like out of Perth, but you love what we're doing and you want to connect in, and you connect in via our online experience. Either way, make it a priority to be part of that every single week, to worship together, to learn together, to encourage one another. Then the second of our Elevate Essentials is in our Elevate teams, where you'll find your fit. We're called to be contributors, not consumers, where you'll be able to contribute to help other people in their journey following Jesus. Number 3 is our Elevate groups. Again, better facilitated live here in Perth, but we've seen people launch watch parties and gather with their friends, and we make the Elevate group notes available via our app, and you can actually have an Elevate group anywhere in the world. And these are about doing life together, about following Jesus together, about encouraging one another together. I said it the other week, following Jesus is a team sport. And the 4th of our Elevated Essentials is giving. Investing some of the financial resources God's blessed us with to invest in the mission of the church, to ensure that the Little C Church, again, in our case, Elevate Church, has the financial resources for us to do what we're called to do, and ultimately reach more people and build more people. And then the 5th of our Elevate Essentials is to prioritize investing and inviting. As much as following Jesus is a team sport, he's given us the job. You're my witnesses now. So get busy. Get about it. Be looking for unchurched and de-churched people that you can build relationships with, you can encourage, you can pray for, you can spend time with, and hopefully God will use you, and we know he will if you allow it, to lead them towards Jesus, maybe ultimately see them follow him, and then continue to be transformed by him. So I'm going to invite you, as we're still in the very early stages of 2025, in our 75th birthday year, at the beginning of the year, with our 5 Elevate Essentials in mind. Take a first step if you're kind of new to any or all of those, or take a next step. If you've either only kind of jumped into 2 of those things, well, consider a 3rd and a 4th. Or if you've taken a step into one of our Elevate Essentials, but there's a bit more to be done, another step to be taken, take a next step, a first step or a next step. And as we go through 2025, positioning ourselves in 2025, 75 years after the initial Sunday school decided it was their turn to get busy pioneering, let's position ourselves to be used even more effectively by God to reach people and to build people. See you next week.